Welcome back to... It's been a while, isn't it? Red cards, key injuries, goals, screamers, derbies, clean sheets, double saves, records broken. So much has happened in these first few weeks of the 24-25 campaign. So I, for one, thank goodness we have another international break coming up so we can dissect it all. Right, guys? Is this thing on? It's been so hectic that in the furore of all the action, as well as the recent media storm around us, no matter where you stand on that, and I will come to that, I think the sheer volume of football, narrative, and incidents means a number of things have been missed about our start in the Arsenal space, but also in the wider football space. Things like, the actual football, because we're quite good. So, no more mucking about. Let's dive in and see what we've missed. First up, switches. Arsenal have definitely upped their switches from last season, by which I mean passes that, you know, are switches. A quick look at the data backs that up. We are now 5th highest for switches in the league at 2.67 switches per 90, according to FBref, after the Leicester game, which is up from 18th in the league at 1.71 switches per 90 in 23-24. There's a couple of Hollywood passes that we can all remember, like some of Ben White's out to Martinelli, for example, and Rice was spraying them right and left against Leicester beautifully. But just collectively, I sense the players are being instructed to find the fast side a lot earlier and with more consistency. Generally, there just feels like more of a willingness to go longer, like to Kai Havertz for the knockdown from the back, possibly due to Ødegaard's injury, seeing it as a more viable ball progression method. Before the Leicester game, we had launched the highest percentage of our goal kicks in the Premier League so far. The nerds among you, so all of you, will remember Declan Rice's Athletic article last season, where he spoke about Mikel's attitude towards switches, saying, quote, "The manager doesn't like switches, really." And although there was a lot of context there that gets missed out, I'd be curious if a journalist could ask Mikel about why those numbers are creeping up. Maybe the fantastic Art de Roche, who always asks interesting questions that get Mikel talking, can ask him. As I say, I think it could be partly Ødegaard related, but I think it's also related to the teams that we've played and where we think we can hurt them. Part of the plan versus City was clearly to hit Martinelli early against Kyle Walker, and against Spurs, with how aggressive their fullbacks can be, it made sense too. Against Leicester, although they were pony in possession, credit to them because they remained very narrow defending the box on one of our best in-possession days in a while, but that meant that the spaces were out wide. It's a very small sample, so let's not get ahead of ourselves, but the field tilt numbers, calculated by the share of percentage of touches in the final third between two teams, are way down on last season, finishing second last year to City with 69.47% on average. We're currently down at 38.66%, according to Mark Stats Club. Huge caveat to the game states we've been in and so on, but generally, is there a desire to spend less time in the final third breaking teams down? So naturally, you then have more of an opportunity to go long and switch. And if so, why is that? It's too early to draw conclusions, but it's certainly one to watch as the season progresses. Second, we need to talk about Gabriel's impact, going massively unnoticed, in my opinion. Big Gabby has had an incredible start to the season. On form right now, there's an argument he is the #1 centre-back in the league and arguably in Europe. That might sound hyperbolic, but who cares? I'm an Arsenal fan. And I've not seen him out of control, misplace a pass, lose a duel, even make a mistake in these opening 6 Premier League games and even in the Champions League, though I'm sure I'm forgetting something. He has been absolutely imperious. One of my frustrations with the narrative around Saliba and Gabriel was played out while listening to the commentators on TNT Sports against Atalanta. Saliba cuts out Lookman in a brilliant moment, and it's, wow, what a player he is, top centre-back. But any great action Gabriel does, any block, clearance, even when they were saying explicitly, Gabriel there to head away again, was automatically narrativized on the follow-up as, what a great pairing they are. He never seems to get that same individual praise. I'm cherry-picking one example from one broadcaster right now, but I do think there is a way to go before Gabriel gets his full recognition from the wider football space. He's always the centre-back being pulled out of the combined 11s against other top teams, despite literally being in the PFA Team of the Year. Against Leicester, he had an extraordinary impact, and thanks to Scott Willis's great data viz, we can see it playing out. Look at his heat map, look at his influence, look at how many passes inside, cross-pitch, final third. This is a guy who's becoming a complete centre-back, and we know how solid he is at defending. This newfound influence this year, in my view, comes from a few things. Firstly, Gabriel's technical aesthetic bias, as the nerds call it, basically he looks a bit clumsy on the ball occasionally, sometimes masks how good he is on it, as he's one of our most adept line breakers. But it's harder to ignore when someone's popping up in new spaces. We're seeing him stepping forward into the pocket in certain games this season, driving forward and playing combinations in the final third now, even getting more shots off. It's super exciting, so we're noticing. But why is this happening now? Well, I think it's partly confidence, but I think it's a lot because we haven't seen him paired with Zinchenko. This is no shade on him, but Zinchenko is a very, very high touch player for a fullback. Of course, he's coming inside a lot, so that's natural, but even then, he's higher touch than a lot of other fullbacks who do that. He naturally puts Gabriel behind the ball, less touches, as Zinchenko goes into that second line and faces play, which reduces Gabriel's influence. Against Leicester this season, Gabriel had 96 touches. The last time we played them at home with Zinchenko in front of him in 22-23, he had 67. And against low blocks, he now seems to be the one encouraged forward, with Saliba left to deal with the striker, as we saw against Vardy. The flexibility of a fullback like Calafiori is so impressive, but it also means Gabriel isn't restricted. He can step into the game when it calls for it, especially when Thomas Partey steps in on the right-hand side and Calafiori pulls wide, and show his quality on the ball that isn't always appreciated. Gabriel's carries into the final third, short passes completed, touches in the attacking penalty box, and touches in the attacking third are all among the top 20% or above in Europe when compared to other top 5 league centre-backs. We'll do full videos on this at some point, but the impact Calafiori, Marino, Gabriel's new influence, and so on is going to have on Martinelli is going to be absolutely huge. The left-hand side is about to be revolutionised. Gabriel is arguably the perfect embodiment of the Arteta project, and he needs the recognition for what he's done. Next, corner screening. In August, the Times reported that the Premier League were clamping down on the offence of holding. No, not that one, although there were some offensive performances I can recall, as in blocking or obstructing, and it would be penalised more stringently in set pieces. I remember reading that and thinking, Ben White? Last season, we all remember Ben White's antics on corners, causing mayhem, playing with goalkeepers' gloves and bending some of the rules to gain advantage. Many were concerned that one of our tactics for dominating from set pieces was going to be wiped out. But this is the genius of Nico Jova. He just adapts. What we do now, instead of one player being responsible for the goalkeeper, as Ben White was, is we use multiple players and form a screen, but crucially, turn our backs, so it's harder to penalise. Against City, you see it perfectly in action. On the corner before the goal, you see Martinelli lurking, then as it's swung in, he steps in and turns his back to Ederson with Saliba helping, which makes it very hard for the goalkeeper to move. And then on the goal itself, he does the exact same thing, hanging at the back post before stepping in, turning his back to Ederson, and leaving Gabriel the space to run into after some of the funniest defending I've ever seen in my life from Kyle Walker. Spurs were more alive to it, but for the goal, we do exactly the same thing. White and Saliba get their bodies in front of the goalkeeper, then turn. If you get an opposition to hold you, fine, because if you still manage to turn your body and back into the keeper, there's no chance you're being done for obstruction, and you're just adding another obstacle for the goalkeeper, frankly. So, cheers, James Maddison. Enjoy your roast. Again, against Brighton, Gabriel at the back post gets across and puts his back into the goalkeeper. It feels like it's his sole purpose before even getting to the ball even. Apologies as there's no better replay to see it closer, but you can see it happen from almost every corner in this game, depending on its intention or setup. We don't always manage to work it. For example, Leicester dealt with it very well with players protecting the goalkeeper, but it's a really useful little adaptation if we can do it. One we're alive to in our box too against Spurs. It's yet another example of the tiny details being worked on at Arsenal, and our set-piece record speaks for itself. And a couple more things. Saka has looked really good receiving centrally when Raya or the centre-backs have gone long, I've noticed. The most obvious example is the Brighton one, but he's looked really solid coming inside for Havertz to run off him in a number of different places across the start of the season because he's so strong, and it's a different type of duel than Havertz. Next, Rice is beginning to show us the future by what he was doing against Leicester, a lot deeper, dictating. We've spoken about this before on the channel, but once he goes deeper more permanently, which I think he will, we'll see the explosion. Next, I've absolutely loved the look of Ethan and Miles Lewis-Skelly. Ethan's a star. I was at the Bolton game and he lit up the stadium, but Miles' passing really took me by surprise behind the ball. He was coaching from the sidelines against Spurs and got a yellow for being involved in some sort of voodoo trick with Arteta. At 17, to have the minerals, the quality to come on in the hardest game state in world football and not miss a beat, wow. And I'm so excited to see where both of them go. Finally, Raya's start to the season. You can go back to this video and listen to what we said. Frankly though, I'm not going to take too much credit. Firstly, Raya's done the actual work. And second, it was a bit of a layup of a prediction. He was performing so well but at some point, we had to notice. And finally, non-football. Because I think we've missed the point on something here too. Some of you will have seen I got, maybe fairly because I was calling out Arsenal fans, killed on the Cannon podcast the other day for saying how I felt we were being victims by genuinely believing in the idea that there is an actual media agenda against Arsenal. Honestly, my opinion hasn't massively changed from that video, so feel free to check it out and check out the Cannon podcast where we're doing a lot more work over there. Of course, there's some mad stuff said about us, but while I enjoy defending the badge as much as the next guy, if I'm actually doing analysis, I think the media frenzy around Arsenal is not best explained by a genuine hatred of us, but by the fact we're an engagement-heavy fan base who are currently ruffling some feathers by establishing ourselves back at the top of world football. That is it. We've been the victim of some rubbish calls this season and last season, no doubt. The kicking the ball away stuff is inconsistent, so let's go after it. There's some rubbish clickbait articles, no doubt. But to take that next step, to say there is a lifelong, media-wide, hatred-fueled agenda that's influencing referees against Arsenal, that's where I get off the boat. Now, some fans aren't going that far, but most Big Six fans think the media and the refs are in some way biased against them, so I think if we're actually analysing it, it's much better explained by an echo chamber. I recognise I'm going against the grain here, and I don't want to be the person who tells anyone what to think. It's up to you. However, whatever you think, I do sense something has shifted more meaningfully outside of Arsenal Twitter and the Mail Online. The way the City players spoke about us after that game, what Pep said about war and asking Mikel to be more clear, the way those City players spoke to us on the pitch to Arteta at the end of the match, that wasn't talked about enough because that was different. Guys, we've arrived. Remember when we used to go to the Etihad, get pumped and get an Arsenal were so good, so good. They don't do that anymore. They are rattled. And with Rodri out, they know they have a huge fight on their hands, both on the pitch and elsewhere, to retain that league title. For me, something has changed in this early season. No Odegaard, Rice suspended, no Marino, no Tommy, Calafiori at times, Zinchenko, and we're still 1 point off top after arguably the hardest fixture list in the top 6. We're playing every type of game and getting results. And I feel people's fear. To me, it's palpable. We can call it a media agenda all we like, but personally, I prefer to view it as something else. Not the world against Arsenal, but for the first time in a long time for many, the world seeing Arsenal for what we are. And I think there's a lot of people who don't like what they see.
If you like The Different Knock, you can support us on Patreon monthly, or you can buy us a coffee.